Hello there everyone, welcome to a second thoughts overview of Isabella von Carstein of the Vampire Counts. So I played through the initial turns, getting a feel for how the faction plays out. These are my conclusions. In the end I always showcase my army compositions, the ones I'll try it out for fun. Now a note should be made that this is nearly the same overview as the one from Vlad, specifically because it barely changes. For the most part, instead of the movement range, she relies more on the hero capacity for vampires, and she has that weapon strength. So yeah, that will be the key point of change, and sometimes it's changed a little bit on how you play it out. So let's play then with Isabella von Carstein. So for our short victory condition, you need to control the provinces northern Sylvania and southern Sylvania, pretty much your initial provinces, and to also control Altdorf via vessels or military allies, or of course directly. That's my favorite one. Then you need to occupy, loot, raise, or sack 30 different settlements. Achieving this will give you a casual replenishment rate plus 15%. That's always nice to quickly back up to full strength to continue the conquests. It's a remarkably short victory as well. Basically, it gives you a good taste of the faction, to see if you want to continue with it. Definitely a very good introductory short victory for the vampire counts, you know. Then we have the long victories, still quite, by all means, quite small actually. Achieve the short victory, occupy, loot, raise, or sack 75 different settlements, then control all the provinces of the empire. Basically you're still in the same area around, and to also destroy Reichland. So pretty straightforward, very easy, very basic. Then if you achieve this, you get Winds of Magic, which is always nice because you have tons of spellcasters, especially with Isabella. So yeah, it will help you out throughout your maybe domination goals, maybe whole map completion. It's up to you. Now, Isabella, how is she different than Vlad? By the way, it shows Vlad here. It's a bug. It's just a bug. So she is beloved in death. You can see that from her abilities that she's the daughter. You know, Vlad is not a daughter. So she starts with one blood kiss, access to the unique building the same, starts with Vlad as a legendary hero, and she has the two uniqueness, the hero capacity plus 3 for vampires and weapon strength plus 25% for those embedded vampire heroes. So vampires of course will be a staple in your armies very easily because they do get, you know, that weapon strength. It's always nice, so they'll become quite great single entities. Now, in terms of climates, still the same issue really than others. I wish that they would have different climates. Perhaps that would make the campaign a little bit different. But still an issue. Other than conquering the empire, you're always going to have uninhabitable or unpleasant terrain nearby. So yeah, especially if you try to go for a full map completion, it's going to be a pain actually, because there's so many unpleasant, so many uninhabitable. Yeah, especially with the mountains. Mountains are the key. If you have suitable climate in the mountains, then you're kind of fine. So yeah, not the easiest faction to go and dominate the map with. So your starting province is a 3-settlement province, and you have another 3-settlement province right away, so this gives you quite a solid base to start recruitment or income. It's cool. Although you're surrounded, this is very defensible area. This is very cool to defend, you know. If you even conquer Sufbar or Grand Peak, then suddenly you don't really have too much of an issue to your capital, which is always nice. Remember that you need to keep an eye for your, you know, any possible wars that come from any direction, because you're a vampire. Anyone here kind of hates you, kind of likes you. It's difficult. So typical expansion involves taking care of course, of the nearby vampires, and then you have to decide whether you go after the empire itself, whether you go north to the greenskins or to you defeat the mountain dwarves. Who knows? It's really up to you. It can be, this is an unpleasant area. It does have some mines, so yeah, be wary how you approach your expansion, but typically it's kind of like in a circle around you. That's the sort of blatant idea. So in diplomacy, you're kind of part of the evil tide, but there are some interesting possibilities. Typical enemies will be the Empire, the Dwarves, and with greenskins and ogres, maybe you can get them as allies. That's the sort of idea. Maybe Skaven later on, depends on how they react. I really don't like to get, you know, Thrall as an ally, because he's just really hated by everyone in the north, so that's a big problem. Still, Should be noted that, for instance, Kislev does not have any aversion towards you, which is interesting to try out in a given setting. So attempt to get any greenskin artillery or front line, as well as ogre artillery or missile units. I didn't include, the front line because there's so many, it would fill out the whole screen. But yeah, you still can complement, of course, your already massive melee forces with anything that is ranged. That's typically the main idea here. So, specifically to the faction, in terms of mechanics, it's the relationship, of course, between Vlad and Isabella. Gives them plenty of bonuses to the army they're fighting with. We'll talk more about it when we get to army comps. At first, basically, Vlad has Vanguard deployment wall units. Isabella gives better stats to fast units like Dire Wolves, Felbats, Vargas, that sort of idea. But a good key element here is that you start with Vlad as a hero. You may not notice the difference, is that he starts with his unique weapon and unique ring, which means he's a menace already in the battlefield. He has his regeneration, which is crazy, and then he has his ward save. So by all means, this alone, just Vlad can kill nearly anything in the early game, especially the very early game. So you kind of don't need all those units, especially with Vlad being like this. So the main point and main selling point here is that Isabella kind of has a very easier start, a much easier start, because Vlad is such a beast as a legendary hero. That's the sort of idea. Now let's talk about the other mechanics. Raise the Dead. It's pretty much your top means of recruitment. Fight battles, you stand on top of that battlefield and you watch them raise. And in essence, all that you need is to be on the lookout for these markers, okay? And especially in markers in terms of battlefields. I still don't have any at this point in time. But of course, I just wanted to showcase this with that marker, that it gives you access to some better units, some Grave Gods, here, some Crit Ghouls, some Cairn Wraiths. Maybe I would want this. So that's the sort of idea. The main issue that I have with this is that it kind of negates the importance of these military buildings. But, well, maybe they will change this in the future, so be aware of that. For now, for the most part, Raise the Dead, perfect mechanic. Blood Kisses. They're about getting the Bloodline Lords. These are excellent legendary lords. You'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 15 in total. So for the most part, you're not going to get, typical lords, unless you're really in a rush. So each of them has different unique skill lines. At least these guys have unique skill lines. These guys have unique skill lines. These guys, okay? So, each of the 3 that you will unlock, of course, will have the same, but still very good skill lines. I'll showcase those in the army compositions. Now, the bloodlines themselves give you these buffs. If you awaken 1 lord, it gives you weapon strength for cover units. 2, it also gives you unit experience gain for turn, and the 3rd one gives you +2 for bloodlines in the Raise Dead pool capacity. So this is always great because you can have different combinations of these. Maybe you want to go for research rate. This is one of my favorites. I go for research rate really fast, or you can go for Raise the Dead capacity for Crypt Ghouls and Ambush success chance, because you always have to synergize with the lord that you're getting. So this is one that I typically get because this lord, I can use it in a specific way. It's really cool. It's a really cool idea. I just wish there were more, honestly, of this. For instance, for Isabella, this one is also a nice one because you can get more experience gain for all the vampires that you'll be recruiting, and that's a very typical one to select for Isabella herself. Now, you require corruption so that you don't take attrition. Show you here. So this is one main issue. Where you're going to attack, you better have some corruption there. Perhaps lead with some heroes. Isabella, once more, has it easier because she does have those heroes available very quickly. So yeah, that's perhaps one of the main things with Isabella. Her campaign feels a little bit better than Vlad's. At least a little bit easier. So if you're considering your first campaign, by all means, either Vlad or Isabella, they're good. Isabella perhaps a little bit easier, if not a little bit more streamlined into heroes. Now, should you lose entire units in battle, there's a Dead Rise Again. This can bring back units to life. This allows you to have to avoid recruiting more troops. I really cannot show you because I don't have anything here that I can attack that I would make me lose troops. But yeah, still always know that you have a chance to recover all your units, including lords and heroes. Even if you lose them in battle, they may yet come back to life, which is really cool. It allows you to avoid having to recruit more troops. So in terms of province edicts, you have a growth and lesser construction cost for all buildings. Then you have more control and vampiric corruption. Remember, corruption is always nice. Then we have income from all buildings and the nice recruit rank and local recruitment capacity. Now this is kind of overshadowed because of course most of the time you'll be using to raise the dead, but still you can definitely be benefiting from typical recruitment, which is always cool, Now, then we have the army stances. Let me move her away so that I can showcase. You do have some basic ones, but there's a penalty here. I'll showcase. So you have channeling, which gives you more winds of magic power reserve. It's good. Every single lord has is a caster, so it requires that, and enables replenishment in foreign territory. So this is how you will replenish. However, you don't have an encamp, which means notice that this doesn't prevent attrition. This is the one that makes you immune to attrition, raiding. It costs 50% movement, so when you're in attrition locations, you'll need to put on raiding. What it doesn't give you is replenishment. So you have to bounce between these two in order to either replenish or take casualties from attrition, which is a bit of a problem. This is why both the Dark Elves and the Vampire Counts have it the most difficult going through uninhabitable terrain because of the attrition and the lack of having one stance that allows you both, Then you have ambush, 25% movement required, and march to get more movement at the cost of being very easy to overcome you if the enemy attacks, so be wary of that. Yeah, nothing to see here. Just always remember you lack that replenishment and immunity to attrition in camp stance, for instance, or sort of in camp stance, so it's really difficult for you to conquer uninhabitable terrain. So speaking of buildings, it's kind of the same as with Vlad. You do have that early mausoleum of the Mad Count to allow you to have more vampires. This should be a priority specifically for Isabella, so that because she benefits from them, you can have a very frontline hero army, which is really cool. Then we have the von Carstein Court Hall, giving you good buffs faction-wide. Control, vampire corruption is always nice. Hero recruit rank for vampires is always nice. So once again, that focus on the vampires as well. And then of course you have a good gold mine, which is always excellent. In terms of military buildings, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 military buildings. Only 2 of them can be built to the fullest in a lower tier, in a minor settlement, of course. Now tier 3 units are actually quite decent, but you can't build an army on it that easily. So tier 4 and 5, that's where the big guns are. The Blood Knights, even the Vargulfs, the Terror guys, they're really nice. You have the Mortis engines, it's really cool. So in terms of priority, you should always aim to have those. The big issue is that for the most part, even for your elite armies, in units, you might as well just go with the Raise the Dead mechanic, but it's really up to you. Then growth is actually rather weak. It's very difficult to grow, or expensive, shall we say. Okay, so I'll explain why. The growth building actually costs a lot. It takes a long enough time. You'll need to get 30 growth. It's kind of low compared to other factions. Okay, so it's really difficult, and for the most part, you don't really want just this. You want the income. Okay, you want the income and the control here on this other building. So yeah, it's going to be a difficult one. It does give you some local recruitment capacity, which is always nice, and the recruitment possibility from necromancers, which is always a nice hero to have. And then you have the vampiric corruption in adjacent provinces and in your own province. Don't neglect this. At least one in each province is great because of how the corruption goes and how it is essential for you to keep conquering. But yeah, it's still a rather bland selection. So you may enjoy having at least some clear choices. Never wrong with going with some income generation. Now, research. Research is really useful overall. It's It's divided into bonuses for zombies and skeletons here. Okay, so you have some bonuses for skeletons, for zombies, even for some grave gods, which is always nice. Then you have it divided into the crypt ghouls and crypt horrors here, also with the hex wraiths and the cairn wraiths, which is always nice. So all buffs, that's basically what you get. Then you have for the beasts. This is most useful for Isabella because she does buff these units. So dire wolves, fire, you know, and the fell bats, of course, and into the bigger beasts, the Vargeists and the Vargulfs, which replace them kinda, and even the Terrorgeists. It's always nice to have those. And this is more of the campaign and also buffing the Blood Knights and more effective units such as the Mortis engines, of course. So for the most part, this is what you'll want for more income, for more growth. It's always important, of course. You also get some growth here. So yeah, that's typically the idea here. With Isabella, I would honestly go here for a very easy early game with strong, very fast moving dire wolves and fell bats to get rid of anything that may cause you harm, like any missile units, and then your vampires can just sweep in any infantry or any cavalry, really, because they're so powerful. That sort of idea can work. Of course, nothing's stopping you from going into more traditional ideas too. So as always, you have your Lord skills, your specific ones, the yellow line or melee, then you have the casting line. Every single Lord from the vampire accounts has both melee stuff and casting, so yeah, beware of that. You're going to need a lot of decision making in terms of which skills you go for. Then you have the red line or army capacity or army line, of course, and then you have the blue line or campaign. Starting with the blue line, it allows quick replenishment and quick character experience gain, look at that, for heroes, and reduced upkeep. So these are the ones that are important, and the rest I'll honestly disregard, unless you really want to go for lightning strike, for instance, which is typically what you may wish, of course. Red line has good combinations. It is easy to synergize. It has the low quality troops and higher quality troops there, so it's really cool. Okay, the only issue is how every lord is a caster, so you may have to decide early on what you wish to ensure that you have the skill points for it. Okay, so typically the main idea is that maybe you want to buff up some troops that you'll end up using in the late game as well, and then you get some specific spells to assist you in the early game. Not with Isabella, I'm talking with a secondary lord, for instance. Heroes are among the best, some of the best in the game. You have the vampires. In specific, you're going to focus a lot on the vampires. They have the replenishment, they have the spread corruption, which is two things that you immediately want. They do have the hunger, so they also can survive on their own, and then they have the buffs with Isabella, which is always nice. And in terms of other heroes, you can get the necromancers, which is always cool. They're very supportive of your troops. They do boost income and replenish troops as well. Then you have the banshees, a kind of like of an assassin unit, and the same thing with the White King, a good frontline hero to fight the enemy. But for the most part with Isabella, you're going for the caster heroes, the vampires, because they're good both in casting and melee, and they replenish troops and they spread corruption, all useful things. So here are the red line skills for the vampire counts. They have a rather short roster, no missile units whatsoever. The good thing is that they're divided into categories, so all infantry here, both low tier, higher tier. That allows you to basically use this skill early on and have the same one applied to the elite troops, which is always useful, always useful. Now, Vlad and Isabella. They're most known for getting a very good vampire hero doom stack, okay? So because she starts with the ability to have even more vampires early on, then they become very powerful already. So yeah, and they also have all those buffs to their melee attack, melee defense, weapon strength, which is really cool. It makes them really powerful. So by all means, go for it. I'll just showcase a little bit of different combinations. These are mostly the same that I showcased with Vlad, with just some small exceptions. And of course the main idea here is that she does give buffs to the fast units, to the monsters, the direwolves, fellbats, vargulfs, vargeists, and terrorgeists, which is why you'll see some combinations with those as well, just for fun. So this is what it typically would go for, like or like a Doomstack. You can put as many heroes as you wish, but for the remaining slots, nothing wrong with going with some fast units as well to accompany those heroes. And in specific, this will make a very good army without spending too many skill points there as well. Same thing, this is more for an early game type army. Most of these units are tier 3 or below, and then you have these top tier ones that maybe you're going to raise the dead for those if you have a big battle, you know. Always count that you can have, you know, more heroes. I just like to have this sort of streamlined idea, but with Isabella, definitely this is kind of like the typical that you will go for. I'm just showcasing different possibilities should you wish to vary a little bit in your playthroughs. Same thing here, you know, more of a monster and cavalry, you know, no infantry units here whatsoever, no infantry units here whatsoever, and this one has a little bit of more infantry units should you prefer that. It's really up to your style. In this case, just remember that with the previous skills that she gets, that she benefits, you know, mostly the monsters, so having some monsters in the army always is beneficial for her. Now, this is then the sort of examples that I typically show for the Bloodline Lords. Why? Because they have specific ones. For instance, this with the upkeep reduced minus 100% for Felbats, so all of those babies, they don't cost anything. And then you have minus 40 for Vargeists. So now you see why this army is like this. This is a very good siege assault army, for instance. It's still useful in any other battle. It's very good as a reinforcing army because they get there so fast. So yeah, that's the sort of idea that I want you to have a thought. Nothing wrong with having different ideas for you, but this is what I take. And then we have the crypt, the ghoul legendary lords. So basically, not legendary lords, you know, from the bloodlines, that's what I meant. They do have some bonuses for crypt horrors and crypt ghouls, which is why, you know, having an army focus on those, they got some buffs, so definitely it's a good idea to have just likewise some variety. And then nothing wrong with trying just some ethereal combinations. This is just for fun. Always ensure that you're not fighting someone that has, you know, magical attacks throughout, because this will crumble against anyone with magical attacks. So don't be facing Tzeentch with this, that's for sure. But provided you can tell the difference, or you can just mix in some units, maybe some units from outposts, etc. That's just for you to have some different combinations. And then the most straight up line or idea is to have the Grave Gods with the Blood Knights. These just synergize so well, and especially with those Blood Knight lords from the bloodlines. Then they get reduced upkeep for the Grave Guards and reduced upkeep for the Blood Knights. Now you know why this army looks the way it looks like. Now, conclusions. Isabella does not seem that she changes much from Vlad. You know, most of the differences, she appears to be just losing the speed for their armies for more hero capacity and weapon strength for vampire heroes. However, this turns her into a good Doomstack idea immediately, with lots of vampires that you can recruit, put them in the army, or you can use them as scouts even if you prefer, assassins, whatever you'll get with the assassin idea. Remember that you can get the blood kisses because you can kill the characters. No, that sort of idea may play out in a much different way. And in addition to that, she'll likely be a much easier faction to control than Vlad, especially because Vlad becomes a nightmare to deal for any enemy he has. He starts with his unique items, which is great, and his unique abilities, and that way your initial army is so much more powerful than you know, when you start with Vlad. That's the idea here. So with Isabella, she starts with a very powerful army. She can get, you know, build up many characters. She'll just have a squad of vampires defeating anyone, and in addition, it spreads corruption much easier, which is also important for the vampire counts. So yeah, much easier time fighting with the vampire counts. Now, your army still consists of good infantry, great cavalry, great flying units, good chariots, no missile units, and it does rely on magic early on. Replenishment is good, but climate will of course cause issues. So Isabella does suffer a bit as well because of the proximity of the mountains. They are unpleasant, so that's a big issue, a big no-no for, you know, trying a more domination-centric campaign. Still, I believe now it's time to not play with Vlad, but rather to play with Isabella as your lord, and Vlad being your hero companion.